Former President Donald Trump repeated a series of false claims, many of which have long been debunked, about immigration and other subjects in a speech at a Sunday evening rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City. FEMA and migrants. Trump falsely claimed that the Biden administration has not responded to Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, then repeated his familiar false explanation. You know why? They spent their money on bringing in illegal migrants, so they didn't have money for Georgia and North Carolina and Alabama and Tennessee and Florida and South Carolina. He repeated they didn't have any money for them. They spent all of their money on bringing in illegal immigrants. FEMA did not spend its disaster relief money on undocumented people. Congress appropriated the agency more than $35 billion in disaster relief funds for fiscal 2024, according to official FEMA statistics, and also gave FEMA a much smaller pool of money, $650 million in fiscal 2024, for a program aimed at helping communities shelter migrants. Contrary to Trump's claims, these are two separate pots of funds. Trump's favorite immigration chart. Trump repeated his long debunked false claim that his favorite chart about migration numbers at the southern border, which he had fortunately turned his head to look at when a gunman tried to kill him at a campaign rally in July, has an arrow at the bottom pointing to the day I left office, when he said the U.S. had the lowest illegal immigration that we've ever had in recorded history. The chart doesn't show that. In fact, the arrow actually points to April 2020, when Trump still had more than 8 months left in his term, and when global migration had slowed to a trickle because of the COVID-19 pandemic. After hitting a roughly 3-year low, not an all-time low, in April 2020, migration numbers at the southern border increased each month through the end of Trump's term. Harris's border role. Trump repeated these false claims about Vice President Kamala Harris. She was the border czar. She was in charge of the border. Harris was never border czar, a label the White House has always emphasized as inaccurate. And she was never in charge of border security, a responsibility of Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. In reality, President Joe Biden gave Harris a more limited immigration-related assignment in 2021, asking her to lead diplomacy with El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras in an attempt to address the conditions that prompted their citizens to try to migrate to the United States. Migrants, cities, and towns. Trump repeated his vow that, if elected, he would liberate every city and town that has been invaded and conquered by migrants. This is nonsense. No U.S. town has been conquered by migrants. Trump's rally crowd in Butler, Pennsylvania. Trump repeated his wild exaggeration that there were 101,000 people at the campaign rally he held earlier this month at the same Pennsylvania site where a gunman tried to kill him in July. CNN affiliate KDKA in Pittsburgh reported that the Secret Service put the crowd at 24,000 people, while the Trump-supporting sheriff of Blair County, Pennsylvania, James Ott, said in a speech at the rally itself, more than 3 hours before Trump took the stage, that he was looking out at 21,000 plus people. Trump and the Nordstream 2 pipeline. Trump repeated his false claim that he ended the Nordstream 2 gas pipeline from Russia to Germany, adding, it was dead. Trump did not kill the pipeline. He signed sanctions related to the project in a law about 3 years into his presidency, when the pipeline was already about 90% complete, and the state-owned Russian company behind the project announced in December 2020 that construction was resuming. Trump and the defeat of ISIS. Trump repeated his false claim that it took us like 4 weeks to defeat the ISIS terror group, even though generals had told him it would take 5 years. The ISIS Caliphate was declared fully liberated more than 2 years into Trump's presidency. Trump and inflation. Trump falsely claimed that, when he was president, we had no inflation. Cumulative inflation during Trump's presidency was about 8%. Harris and inflation. Trump falsely claimed that Harris's votes to break legislative ties in the U.S. Senate caused the worst inflation in the history of our country. Aside from the claim about Harris's role, it's not true the U.S. has had its worst inflation ever during the Biden administration. Trump could fairly say that the U.S. inflation rate hit a 40-year high in June 2022, when it was 9.1%. But that was not close to the all-time record of 23.7% set in 1920. And the rate has since plummeted. The most recent available inflation rate at the time Trump spoke here was 2.4%. Harris and law enforcement. Trump touted his endorsements from police officers and law enforcement organizations, then falsely said of Harris, "I don't think they have one cop. They're looking for just one cop." In early September, 101 current and former law enforcement officials, including active sheriffs, police chiefs, and other senior officers, released a letter endorsing Harris. A Michigan sheriff gave a televised speech endorsing Harris at the Democratic National Convention in August, as did a former Capitol Police officer who was injured when Trump supporters stormed the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Trump's border wall. The former president repeated his false claim that he built 571 miles of wall on the southern border. That's a significant exaggeration. Official government data shows 458 miles were built under Trump, including both wall built where no barriers had existed before and wall built to replace previous barriers. Trump and the military. The former president repeated his false claim that I rebuilt our military. In total, rebuilt all of our military. Trump has previously made clear that he is claiming to have replaced all of the military's equipment. This claim is not even close to being true. The military has tens of thousands of pieces of equipment, and the vast majority of it predates the Trump administration. Todd Harrison, an expert on the defense budget and a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank, told CNN in November 2023 after Trump made a version of the claim. Harrison said in an email at the time, "Moreover, the process of acquiring new equipment for the military is slow and takes many years. It's not remotely possible to replace even half of the military's inventory of equipment in one presidential term. I just ran the numbers for military aircraft, and about 88% of the aircraft in the U.S. military inventory today, including Air Force, Army, Navy, and Marine Corps aircraft, were built before Trump took office. In terms of fighters in particular, we still have F-16s and F-15s in the Air Force that are over 40 years old." The 2020 election. Trump repeated his false claim that his opponents used COVID to cheat in the 2020 election. There is no basis for the claim that the Democrats cheated. Many states, including states with Republican election chiefs and Republican governors, modified their election procedures because of the COVID-19 pandemic.